July 15th, 1099. A man named Raymond of Aguilers stands in the courtyard of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He is a priest. He is the official chronicler of the expedition, and he writes down what he sees, not because he is horrified, but because he wants the world to know that God has won. He writes, "In the temple and porch of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees in bridle reins." He does not apologize. He does not express regret. He calls the scene he is describing the fulfillment of prophecy. 4 years before that morning, none of this had been planned. No army existed. No strategy had been drawn. There was only a speech delivered by a pope in a field in southern France. This is the story of how one speech turned hundreds of thousands of ordinary people into men who stood in blood up to their knees and called it the will of God. Begin with the numbers, because the scale of what happens cannot be understood without them. In 1095, no professional army is mobilized, no state budget is allocated, no logistics plan exists. There is only a speech by Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont on November 27, 1095. The result? Estimates suggest 60,000 to 100,000 people begin marching east within a single year. Not professional soldiers, peasants, craftsmen, minor landless knights, merchants, priests, women. The journey from France to Jerusalem, approximately 5,000 kilometers, on foot. Through Central Europe, the Balkans, Anatolia, Syria. No accurate maps, no supply system, no medical infrastructure. 3 years after departure, only approximately 12,000 to 15,000 fighters still stand before the walls of Jerusalem. The rest are dead. Disease, starvation, battle, exhaustion, and, in at least one documented instance, something far worse than any of those. And those survivors, skeletal, exhausted, walking over the bodies of the men they had marched alongside for 3 years, looked up at the walls of Jerusalem and began digging trenches, building towers, preparing to attack. Not one of them turned back. The question is why? To understand the First Crusade, you must set aside everything you think you know about the Middle Ages. Europe in 1095 is not a confident, expanding civilization. It is a continent that is shrinking and afraid. In the 4 centuries before this moment, Islam has taken Spain, North Africa, Egypt, the entire Middle East, and portions of Central Asia. Ancient Christian cities, Antioch, Alexandria, Carthage, have been under Islamic rule for generations. And in 1071, at the Battle of Manzikert, the Byzantine Empire suffers a catastrophic defeat against the Seljuk Turks. Emperor Romanos IV is captured alive. Anatolia, Christian land for 1,000 years, is nearly lost in a single afternoon. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos writes to the Pope, "Send soldiers, we are collapsing." Urban II receives that letter, and he sees something in it that is not purely military. Europe in 1095 is being torn apart by internal feudal warfare. Nobles fighting over land, the church locked in a power struggle with the Holy Roman Emperor, separate armies, separate loyalties, no unified Christian project. If Urban can redirect all of that violent energy outward toward a common enemy, he can unify Europe under the church's leadership. He can solve the Byzantine problem, the feudal problem, and the authority problem in a single campaign. And so at Clermont, on November 27, 1095, he delivers a speech that no one transcribed in real time. 5 different versions survive, written after the fact by 5 different chroniclers. They disagree on almost every detail. They agree on one thing. Urban promises that anyone who joins the expedition will receive plenary indulgence. Not reduced punishment in the afterlife, total remission. Every sin committed, erased. In a civilization where the fear of hell is the single most powerful motivating force in most people's lives, that is not an incentive. That is an override. The crowd at Clermont cries out, "Deus lo vult!" God wills it. Urban II knows in that moment that he has succeeded. But the crusade does not begin with an army. It begins with a catastrophe. Spring, 1096. 6 months before the official armies depart. Peter the Hermit is a wandering French preacher with no military background and no official authorization. He claims to carry a letter from God. He claims that the poor, the lowest, the most forgotten, are equally eligible for the indulgence. He assembles not an army, but a movement. Peasants, beggars, the destitute, children. Estimates suggest 40,000 people. They do not wait for commanders. They do not wait for weapons. They simply begin walking east. On the road through the Rhineland, through the river valleys of what is now Western Germany, some of the Christians in Peter's column begin asking a question. Why travel thousands of kilometers to fight the enemies of God when the enemies of God are living in towns right beside us? They turn on the Jewish communities along the Rhine: Worms, Speyer, Mainz, Cologne. Estimates suggest 5,000 to 8,000 Jewish people are killed before the crusade formally enters Islamic territory. Local bishops attempt to provide shelter and protection. They fail. Emperor Henry IV later issues an edict permitting forcibly converted Jews to return to their faith, because in the chaos, many had been killed for refusing baptism, and others had been baptized at knife point. This is the detail that most history textbooks skip. The first victims of the First Crusade were not Muslims in Jerusalem, they were Jews in Germany, killed by the same Christians who believed they were marching to liberate the Holy Land. And Peter the Hermit's army, the People's Crusade, enters Anatolia and is almost completely annihilated by the Turks near Civito. 3,000 to 7,000 survivors remain. That is the catastrophe before the crusade begins. August 1096, the official armies depart. This time, nobility. Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto. 4 separate forces from 4 different directions. Rendezvous point, Constantinople. Emperor Alexios watches them arrive, and his anxiety is immediate. He asked for soldiers he could command. What has come to his city is 4 autonomous armies with their own agendas, their own nobles, and their own interpretations of what God wants. He demands each leader swear personal loyalty to him before he allows them passage. They swear, and they do exactly what Alexios feared they would do. June 1097, Nicaea falls. The historic Christian city, where the Council of Nicaea codified the Nicene Creed in 325 AD, is retaken from the Turks. But Alexios negotiates a private surrender with the Turkish garrison. He does not allow the Crusaders inside to plunder. The Crusaders are enraged. The first fracture between allies opens, and it never fully heals. October 1097 to June 1098, the Siege of Antioch. 8 months. The Crusaders besiege the city from outside, and find themselves besieged by a separate Islamic relief army from outside. Caught between walls and an army. Food runs out. The horses are eaten first, then the dogs, then the rats, then the leather of boots, boiled until it can be swallowed. Fulcher of Chartres, a priest who is there, writes of something the church does not conceal. Our people did not shrink from eating the putrid bodies of the Saracens. He records it not as an indictment, he records it as a consequence of a war that God has permitted. In his framework, if God permits it, it requires no apology. In the worst of the desperation, a miracle arrives. Peter Bartholomew, a common soldier with a reputation for drinking, announces that Saint Andrew has appeared to him in a vision. The Holy Lance, the spear that pierced the side of Christ at the crucifixion, is buried beneath the floor of a church in Antioch. They dig. They find a piece of corroded iron. No one can verify it. No one needs to. The entire army believes within hours. And on June 28, 1098, with their morale restored by a fragment of metal, the Crusaders break out of their encirclement, defeat the relief army, and hold Antioch. A piece of rust had saved the crusade, or so they believed. June 1099, before the walls of Jerusalem. 3 years after leaving Europe, 60,000 had departed. Approximately 12,000 can still fight. The walls are high and thick. The garrison has prepared extensively, and there is no water. Every well within kilometers has been poisoned or filled. 5 weeks. The Crusaders build siege towers from timber carried from ships and forests far away. On July 15, 1099,
a tower makes contact with the wall. Godfrey of Bouillon is the first man to step onto the battlements. What happens next is recorded in 5 separate chronicles written by men who were present.
The Crusaders pour into the city. They kill Muslims, they kill Jews, driving them into the synagogue and setting it on fire. The violence moves through the streets without discrimination or pause. How many die? Modern historians estimate 3,000 to 8,000. Later Islamic chronicles give figures of 70,000, a number most contemporary scholars consider significantly overstated, written in the grief and anger of aftermath. The honest answer is, we do not know exactly. We know it was mass killing. We know it was documented by the killers themselves as righteous, and Raymond of Aguilers, standing in it, recording it, writes the sentence that history cannot erase. In the temple and porch of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. It was a just and wonderful judgment of God that this place should be filled with the blood of the unbelievers. He calls it consecration. He calls the blood of the dead proof of God's favor. And now, the moment history records as one of its deepest ironies. Jerusalem falls on July 15th, 1099. Pope Urban II, the man who stood in a field at Clermont 4 years earlier, the man who delivered the speech that moved a continent, the man who promised remission of sins to everyone who marched, the man who had been waiting 4 years for news, dies on July 29th, 1099. 14 days after Jerusalem falls, before the news can reach Rome, he never knows he succeeded. Godfrey of Bouillon, first over the wall, elected leader of Jerusalem, is offered the title of king. He refuses it. His reason, recorded in the chronicles, "I will not wear a crown of gold where my lord wore a crown of thorns." The man who had just commanded one of the largest urban massacres of the medieval era refuses a royal title on moral grounds. He accepts the title, Defender of the Holy Sepulchre, instead. He dies the following year, in 1100. Raymond of Toulouse, offered the kingship before Godfrey, also refuses. He says he will not rule in a place where God has suffered. 2 men, who had just overseen the killing of thousands of civilians, declining royal honors for reasons of spiritual scruple. Neither of them saw any contradiction in this. That is not a detail. That is the entire story. And here is the hardest question. The question history raises and no one wants to answer directly. How do people who believe they are doing God's work become capable of doing what they did? This is not a question designed to judge them by modern standards. It is a question about mechanism. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo, whose Stanford prison experiment remains one of the most disturbing demonstrations of ordinary human behavior under institutional pressure, described what he called the Lucifer effect. Ordinary people can commit atrocities given the right conditions. The Crusaders had every one of those conditions. A clearly defined in-group identity. Deus lo vult. God wills it. We are the chosen instrument. A dehumanized enemy. Unbelievers, enemies of God, people whose deaths constitute sacred acts rather than crimes. The highest possible authorizing voice, the Pope, and through him, God. And 3 years of extreme suffering, hunger, disease, the deaths of friends and family on the road, that had stripped away every normal psychological inhibition. But here is what matters more than any of that. Raymond of Aguilers is not writing propaganda. He is not performing for an audience. He is writing what he genuinely believes. His indifference to the suffering he is describing is not the absence of morality. It is morality, operating inside a completely different framework. In that framework, Muslims and Jews are enemies of God. Killing the enemies of God is righteous action. Their blood on sacred ground is not a crime. It is a consecration. That logic, inside his own conceptual world, is internally coherent. Every step follows from the one before it. And that is precisely what makes it the most disturbing thing in this entire story. Not the cruelty, the coherence. The First Crusade establishes the Kingdom of Jerusalem. It lasts 91 years, until Saladin retakes the city in 1187. But the real legacy of the First Crusade is not territorial, it is linguistic, and it is psychological. The word crusade in modern English does not simply carry a historical meaning, it carries weight. 9 days after September 11, 2001, President George W. Bush uses the word crusade in a public address. The entire Arab world responds within hours. The White House issues a correction and an apology within 24 hours. One word, 900 years of memory, still capable of triggering a diplomatic crisis in the 21st century. But there is also this, and it must be said without flinching. The Crusades, for all their violence, forced open trade routes between Europe and the Middle East that had been severed for centuries. Spices, silk, mathematics, medicine, philosophy, all of it began flowing back to Europe in the wake of returning Crusader armies. The first hospitals in European history were built by the Knights Hospitaller, a military order born directly from the Crusades, serving pilgrims and the wounded in Jerusalem. The concept of international law governing warfare, the architecture of chivalric code, the framework of multinational military alliance, all of it shaped by 200 years of crusading. The result of violence is sometimes civilization, not because violence is justified, but because human beings never do only one thing at a time. What they destroy and what they build travel together, always. July 15, 2024, 925 years after the massacre. No ceremony, no flowers placed, no monument stands in the courtyard of the Temple Mount to mark what happened there. Only the city of Jerusalem, still contested, still disputed, still a place where the past is argued with weapons as well as words. Raymond of Aguilers believed he was recording the triumph of God. Urban II believed he was saving Christian civilization. Godfrey of Bouillon believed that refusing a crown was a moral act. And 12,000 exhausted soldiers, standing before the walls of Jerusalem after 3 years of something close to hell, believed they were completing the will of the Almighty. None of them believed wrongly inside their own world. And that is the most uncomfortable lesson history offers. The greatest atrocities in human history are rarely committed by people who know they are doing evil. They are committed by people who are absolutely certain they are doing what is right. Raymond of Aguilers is not a monster writing in a diary. He is a believer recording a miracle. That is the same act, written with the same hand, in the same blood. The question history leaves us with is not whether they were right or wrong. We know the answer to that. The question is this: what do we do with our own certainty?